Picture this. It's 1980 in Anaheim, California. The air is warm, the streets are quiet, and the world feels safe. It's a place where families leave their doors unlocked, where the night hums softly with crickets, and where nothing bad is supposed to happen. But for one woman, a single mother named Dorothy Jane Scott, safety was an illusion. Because for months, someone had been watching her. Someone who knew her voice, her car, her clothes, her habits. Someone who called her phone again and again, whispering promises of love and threats of death. Dorothy was 32 years old, kind, shy, and devoted to her little boy, Sean. She worked as a secretary at a small shop in Anaheim called Swinger's Psych Shop, a mix of novelty lamps, crystal trinkets, and incense left over from the fading days of the 70s. Everyone who knew her said the same thing. She didn't smoke, didn't drink, didn't date. Her co-workers called her old-fashioned. She went to work, came home, cared for her son, and lived a quiet, ordinary life. But the calls changed everything. At first she thought they were pranks. The voice on the other end sounded calm, sometimes even sweet. He'd tell her he loved her, that he'd been watching her, that she was the only woman for him. But other times his tone would turn cold, dark, terrifying. He'd say things like, "You're mine, Dorothy. I'm going to get you." The calls kept coming, sometimes several times a week. He described things she wore that day, the route she took to work, even small details about her son. Whoever he wasn't far away. Dorothy told her mother about the calls, and they decided she needed to be careful. She even considered getting a gun, but it wasn't in her nature to think the worst of people. Instead, she changed her number. The calls stopped for a while, but the silence didn't last. One day the phone rang again, the same voice, calm, familiar. He said he still loved her. Then, in a whisper, he said he'd kill her soon. Dorothy tried to shrug it off, but her friends noticed the tension in her smile. She started looking over her shoulder more often. At night, she'd double-check the locks, peek out the window, and hold her son a little tighter. She didn't tell many people, maybe because she didn't want to scare them, or maybe because part of her still hoped it was all just talk. But on the night of May 28, 1980, those phone calls became something more, something real. It began with something simple. A co-worker, Conrad Bostron, wasn't feeling well. He'd been bitten by a spider and his arm was swelling fast. Dorothy and another friend, Pam Head, offered to drive him to the hospital. They arrived at the UC Irvine Medical Center around 9 p.m. While Conrad waited to be treated, Dorothy and Pam stayed with him in the waiting room. They chatted, joked, nothing out of the ordinary. When the doctor finally said Conrad could go home, it was close to midnight. Dorothy offered to pull the car around to the entrance so he wouldn't have to walk far. Pam stayed with Conrad while he finished signing paperwork. A few minutes passed, then, out of nowhere, Dorothy's white Toyota station wagon sped past the hospital's entrance, headlights on full beam, moving fast. At first, Pam thought maybe Dorothy had an emergency, but when she didn't come back, that feeling in her gut told her something was very wrong. They waited 10 minutes, 20 an hour. By 2 a.m., Dorothy still hadn't returned. Pam and Conrad called her parents, and soon after, the police. The next morning they found her car. It was burned, completely destroyed, left abandoned in an alley about 10 miles from the hospital. No sign of Dorothy. No blood, no footprints, nothing. The investigation began immediately, but there were no witnesses. No security cameras in 1980, no fingerprints. The only clue was the same one Dorothy had tried to warn her mother about, those phone calls. Days after her disappearance, the phone rang at the Scott family home. Dorothy's mother, Vera, answered. It was a man's voice. Calm, almost polite. He said, "I've got her," and then he hung up. Vera froze. The police were called, but they couldn't trace the call. It was too short. Then the calls came again. Every Wednesday, same time, same voice. "Are you alone?" "I've got her." Sometimes he said he loved Dorothy. Other times, that he'd killed her for 4 years. He called every Wednesday. Detectives set up wiretaps, but the caller always hung up before they could get a trace. The only time he stopped calling was when Vera's husband answered the phone. By now, the case had gone cold. No leads, no suspects. Dorothy was gone, and her family was trapped in an endless cycle of grief and fear. Then, in August of 1984, 4 years after she vanished, construction workers discovered bones on a hillside near Anaheim. Human remains, a dog's remains nearby. And under the soil, a turquoise ring and a watch that had stopped at 12:30 a.m. Dental records confirmed what everyone feared. The remains belonged to Dorothy Jane Scott. The coroner couldn't determine the cause of death. The remains were too decomposed, but one thing was clear. Dorothy had been murdered. Her family buried her quietly. The police reopened the case, but there were still no solid leads. Then, as if to twist the knife one last time, the phone rang again. Dorothy's mother answered. The same voice. "Is Dorothy home?" That was the last call. After that, silence. The man on the phone was never identified. No one was ever arrested. The case remains unsolved to this day. There were suspects, of course, One was a co-worker from the shop named Mike Butler. He lived near the area where Dorothy's remains were found and was known for being a bit strange, but there was never enough evidence to charge him. Others thought the caller might have been someone who'd seen her at work, maybe a customer obsessed with her kindness, someone invisible in her daily routine, someone who blended in so well, no one thought twice. And that's what makes Dorothy's story so haunting. Because the man who took her wasn't a monster lurking in an alley. He was someone close enough to know her habits, her friends, her child's name, someone she probably passed every day without realizing he was watching. When you hear her story, you start to wonder about the small moments, the faces you see in passing, the people who glance too long, the cars that slowed down behind you. You realize how thin the line really is between ordinary life and the edge of horror. Dorothy's story isn't just a mystery. It's a warning about obsession, control, and how easily darkness can hide behind a smile. Even decades later, her case still echoes in the true crime community. Every few years, someone new discovers it, a blogger, a podcaster, a detective, and they go searching for answers that never come. The phone calls remain the key. How did he always know when Vera was alone? Why did he stop calling after Dorothy's remains were found? And how could he have kept that secret for over 40 years? Maybe he's dead now. Maybe he's still out there living quietly, his secret buried deeper than Dorothy's body ever was. The truth might never be known. But what we do know is this. Dorothy wasn't careless. She wasn't reckless. She did everything right. She went to work, helped a friend, and tried to protect her son. And still, it wasn't enough. Her story reminds us how fragile safety really is, how easily comfort can turn to fear, how a single phone call can change everything. Some nights, people still claim they hear the faint buzz of a phone line when they visit her old neighborhood. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's just a story. But if you listen closely, sometimes the line clicks and a man's voice whispers, "I've got her." Dorothy Jane Scott's killer was never found. The case remains one of the eeriest unsolved crimes in California history, a story of love, obsession, and silence that refuses to fade. If you believe in justice, remember her name. Because behind every unsolved mystery there's a family that never stopped waiting for answers. And somewhere, out there, there's a man who once said, "I've got her," and got away with it. If you made it this far, take a second to keep her story alive. Like the video, subscribe for more true crime mysteries, and share it with someone who still believes the truth deserves to be found. Because even though Dorothy's voice was silenced, her story still speaks.